to the third episode of the Superstar Treatment. On this episode, I will be talking about the second under the radar player, and that is Teddy Blueger. As always, before I get started, please like, comment, heck, even subscribe, and I will keep these going. So, just some basic facts about Teddy Blueger. As I mentioned in the last video, and I did confirm, Teddy Blueger is Latvian of birth. So that was something I mentioned in the last video that kind of made me like him. I like European players. I'm just got a little bit of a European bias. And especially from the little bit less popular, like I remember a couple years ago, I liked Wojciech Wolski, who was from Poland, and some players like that. I like when they come from not necessarily the hotbeds of hockey. Just some of his general stats. Again, he not a lot. Last year was his debut season. He played 28 games, which I believe was all near the end. I don't believe he had multiple stints. And in that stint, he had 6 goals, 4 assists, for a total of 10 points. The one thing I thought was to note in comparison to Zach Aston-Reese numbers, as I was watching highlights of Blueger, I noticed that most of Blueger's points were actually, I say legitimate points, meaning Zach Aston-Reese had a game or two, I believe, where he had an empty netter, where Teddy Blueger actually, I believe, scored all of his goals with a goalie actually in the net. But overall, there were some similarities between the two, and what I felt. I mean, again, overall, his advanced stats numbers weren't anything to super brag about. However, there was one, as I was doing some research, and this is a little bit of a newer one that I wasn't familiar with. Now, granted, I'm learning a lot of this as I'm explaining it to you, but last season, Teddy Blueger was actually in the top 10 in IPP, which stands for individual points percentage. And what your individual points percentage says is just how much the player was involved in the team's offense. So I believe his was exactly 70%, or it was right there around. But he was, like I said, he was in the top 10. For some reason, I want to say it was maybe 7th, but I could be misremembering that. But he was up there, obviously. And I just thought that was interesting to note, being that he was in the top 10. I thought that was, noteworthy. However, beyond that, a lot of his Corsi, Fenwick, PDO were very similar. His PDO, I believe, is also actually 103, just like Zach Aston-Reese. So, if you subscribe to the beliefs of PDO, that would mean that Teddy Blueger was a slightly above average in his luck last season. So his scoring rate would reduce a little bit. But again, with such a small sample size, it's hard to fully gauge. But again, I went ahead and watched some highlights, which fortunately there was a little bit more on Teddy Blueger than Zach Aston-Reese for me to find. And here's some of my observations. One thing was Teddy Blueger has, I put it as a question mark, but I would say, I'm pretty certain about it, is that he has a laser beam shot. Unlike Zach Aston-Reese, where a lot of his were hard-working goals, where he was slamming in a rebound, or he got the shot off, but it was kind of a knuckler in some of their cases. Not super powerful. Where 2 of Teddy Blueger's first 2 goals, one was a one-timer, if I'm remembering correctly. Again, I want to say from Crosby, if I'm recollecting properly, from the left circle, and he went over the left shoulder of the goalie and hit top shelf. And then his second goal was a similar one where he retrieved the puck off of a broken play in the offensive zone right around the same place, and he did a snapshot from there, and again was able to pick that corner again with some relative power to it. So I would say that gives him in that aspect, that's one thing that he differentiates himself, and I think gives him different opportunities that aren't really seeming to be in Zach Aston-Reese's repertoire. But again, he's young. There's a lot to go on, and it's a limited sample size. So I'm trying to make observations off of rather small things. So we'll see how this season goes and whether we can observe more of that. Another thing I mentioned for him was, again, like Zach Aston-Reese, but I would say in a little bit of a different capacity, I would say Teddy Blueger has fast hands. Again, the one play I mentioned where he scored that goal, he was in the right position. He was able to pick up a loose puck and then score from the left face-off circle over the goalie. He also had some other goals where he was able to use some stick handling and some quick hands to get in the zone. Now, the one thing I noticed with Blueger was Blueger seemed to be a little bit closer connected with the zone entry than Zach Aston-Reese did on some of these highlights that I saw. And with these quick hands, I think that'll allow Teddy Blueger to, that kind of goes in with the accurate shot and the laser beam. I said is a lot of times to have a powerful shot, you have to have quick hands to get that power initiated in the stick. So, but here's the big thing I wanted to go on, and I noticed with him. In his limited stint, Sullivan had actually entrusted him to some PK time, it looks. Now, I wasn't able to see how much. I was struggling to find that number, how much time he spent on the penalty kill, to see whether the one particular highlight just was a fluke or whether it was something. But I would say, from the little bit that I saw, he is a lot more defensively responsible. And, in fact, in the one play, he made a block shot and then was able to pick up the puck, make a quick breakout off of the penalty kill, and he was actually able to score a shorty. And that was something that I thought was very valuable, because a couple years ago, one of my other favorites, because he was German, was Tom Kuhnackel. And I wonder if there's a little bit of a Tom Kuhnackel, but I would even put the caveat, if you're looking for hopefully a higher ceiling, almost a Brandon Sutter-like player. Because if you remember Brandon Sutter from his time with the Pens, he, at times, was a very big part of the team. Granted, they were generally in short stints of time, but at moments he hit some hot streaks, and he had the ability to put in some goals, in particular, some shorties. But at the end of the day, his bread and butter was his face-offs, his defensive responsibility, and things like this. Now, I don't believe that Teddy Blueger is a center. He, as listed on Hockey Reference, it does say he's a center. So that is something else. I'm not quite sure on his face-off abilities, but it all plays into, that's a valuable role. And with Patrick Hornquist getting a little older, who I would say at times has been one of the penalty killers, you had, I think for a while, Connor Sheary was involved. Now, granted, Sheary's been gone for a year or two now. But you also had Matt Cullen, you had Nick Bonino, and again, if I'm remembering correctly, the penalty kill last year wasn't bad, but it could have used some improvement. So people like Teddy Blueger, a young, solid guy, that could be valuable having him fill that role as a penalty killer. Now, one of the things that I thought was interesting and was reading about the other day was some of the other writers, more notable than I'm not a writer, but some of the other Pens followers and things that are more notable than me mentioned the thought of having McCann and him on the fourth line, and even indicated to, I think, them having some time together on ice in training camp and having some chemistry. Now, I was a little bit of... I didn't really like it at first, my first thought, because as I've mentioned in the previous video, my kind of assumption was that Jared McCann might be a good fit on the first line with Gensel and Crosby, because Sullivan has kind of adopted an approach of he likes to have pairings, and then he can interchange the third member of the forward group in there. So the first line is pretty set, Gensel, Crosby. They've established themselves with some good chemistry. So I thought McCann was going to build off of some of that chemistry and get the first nod at it. But it's looking like maybe Sullivan's wanting to try out some other things, which is fine. If everything works out and he finds a better combination that causes more lines to have more chemistry, then that's the greater good. But the interesting thing I was thinking about when I think of McCann and Blueger playing together is Blueger and McCann both have some speed to them. And nowadays, I think that's a big part of playing defense as a forward, is not being on your heels, but being able to have the presence of mind to get the puck out, maybe sometimes even carry it out if there's not a breakout pass. But they're very quick and pretty elusive. Sorry, I was having a brain fart. Elusive. And again, those are all things that are very helpful for them. And another thing I thought on the offensive capacity that will be helpful with them is McCann, I think, has some good passing ability. A little bit more of a setup man than a trigger man, like, for instance, when he played with Crosby. I think more often than not, Gensel was kind of the trigger man. Crosby's kind of, whatever you need him to be in that situation. And then I think McCann was more of the speed, and sometimes he benefited by his speed and being in good position, but I think he has more assists. In fact, I want to say he had 28 assists total last season, but a proportionately large chunk of those were with his time with the Penguins. So I think combining McCann's assist and setup ability with Blueger's speed and shot, that could lead to some good chemistry and some good things. So, in sum, what do I think about Teddy Blueger? If I'm being honest, I actually think Blueger might be more primed to have a better season than Zach Aston-Reese will. Only because, one, Teddy Blueger comes in with a smaller sample size and a pretty similar result in that sample size. So I think people are not quite as much on the hot seat with him, and will he, won't he kind of thing. So I think at times Blueger still might have a little bit more flexibility with the coaches, where the coaches really want to see what they have, as opposed to with Zach Aston-Reese, they may be a little bit of like, okay, we've given him some chances and he hasn't really done anything with them. So he might be a little bit more stuck in a lower role. So it'll be interesting to see what happens. But I'm going to say I think Teddy Blueger has a little bit more upside. I'm going to say Teddy Blueger is going to be a regular on the penalty kill, I think. And I'm going to say that he scores 16 goals, and I'm going to say 16 goals and 16 assists. I think he's going to do a 16 and 16. So let's see how he does. Leave your thoughts, what you think below, whether I'm crazy, whether you agree, or just tell me what you're thinking, what your numbers are. I'd be interested to see. But overall, I think I have a little bit more optimism for Teddy Blueger than I do Zach Aston-Reese. So, in my next video, as I've mentioned, I will do the third player, which is going to be Jared McCann. We've kind of talked about him a little bit, but I'll hopefully touch on him in a little bit more length in the next video. And after that video, I will go into the last of this short series on Juuso Riikola. Now, fortunately, since my first video where I had to kind of make my little edit about Marcus Pettersson, Pettersson did sign a 1-year bridge deal with the Pens, so that helps bring some of my predictions with him and Gudbranson and their chemistry to some validity. So it'll be interesting to see how it goes. So that kind of takes away some of the opportunity that I was originally thinking might be coming to Juuso Riikola. But nevertheless, I still think he has a chance, and if he does really well, he's definitely maybe, if Johnson continues to struggle, maybe gives them a thought to sub him in. But it's pretty unlikely. So, in a quick teaser, I'm thinking Juuso Riikola still might have another year to wait. But we'll see. Well, till next time, thanks for watching, and I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please like, comment, and heck, even subscribe. And until next time, this has been the Superstar Treatment, episode number 3. Chicka. So I'm sure many of you were yelling at me while I was talking about Pedersen, saying, what an idiot. He's trying to tell us how smart he is, and he doesn't even know that Pedersen's not re-signed. Well, I missed it. I don't know how. But in the article crediting Pensberg, they were saying that there might be an option that we could re-sign him for a 1-year bridge deal at anywhere under, I think it was 1.3 million something. Now, I don't know if he'd go for that, whether he liked it in Pittsburgh enough, and whether that's something he'd be willing to entertain. But obviously that does affect my prediction a little bit, mainly on the end of Gudbranson. If he's not playing with Gudbranson, that was part of my optimism for Gudbranson having a good season. I'm not saying that I don't think that Gudbranson will play badly, but I don't know if some of my feelings of how well he was going to play will be to the same level. Granted, they have some time to explore some options with maybe him playing with Schultz, Trotman, Ruedel, or even Ricola. But still, that's less known than what we were going and talking about the chemistry with Pedersen. Hopefully it works out. I don't know. But if not, that does affect my prediction a little bit and just further says to my point of I think it's time to start bringing in the picks. So I appreciate you sticking with me and my little bit of dumbness. I'm kind of new to this, so I didn't want to totally re-record everything. And so hopefully you enjoyed the video again. And if you did, click like, subscribe, tell your friends, comment. Give me suggestions. I'd love to hear your ideas. I'm new to this. Ideas of how to make this better. I'm willing to listen. Thanks so much.